Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Type 35 build. Today is a pretty monumental day. Well, one small step mechanically, but one giant leap aesthetically. Because for the first time, the car is up on all four wheels. There's still a ways to go, but it's really looking like a full-on vintage race car. Like, from the right angle, it looks like you could just hop in and drive it off. Actually, that's why I installed the headlights. It's a little premature to have them on, but it really sold the look that the car was finished much more than without them. But I'll get back to that. First, the dirt on the tires and wheels. I had a lot of options when I was originally planning what kind of wheels and tires I was going to run, and each had their own benefits and drawbacks. First was wire wheels and bias tires. An obvious choice. They would have made for a really original look, but they landed too far on the wrong side of style over substance for this car. 19-inch wire wheels and Blockley tires are only available from a few sources. This means a small roadside problem suddenly becomes a really big roadside problem because no tire shop carries Blockley tires or any suitable replacement for them. And even fewer still have the tools and knowledge on how to work on a spline drive wire wheel. They'd have looked cool, but they wouldn't have looked how I wanted the car to. Next was aftermarket wheels with a more modern tire, which in a pinch would have worked. Better availability, and with like a modern radial, most every tire shop could have serviced them. Only downside is I couldn't find an aftermarket wheel and tire that was the size I wanted. They were all too short and wide. Next up was narrowing a factory wheel. This was really my favorite choice. I could make the wheel whatever width I wanted, radial tire size to suit, no issues with shops not being able to service them. Would have probably worked, but I only found one 19-inch factory wheel that I really liked, and no one seemed particularly confident that they could narrow the wheel to the width I wanted. Then I stumbled onto these wheels, and it was one of those, oh yeah, that's the stuff kind of moments. They're 19 inches around, so they're properly sized diameter-wise, 4 inches wide, so no narrowing needed, and with 7 spokes, they aren't too terribly dissimilar to the car's overall style. And the best part, the wheels and tires being tall and skinny really complements the car. This is one of those tall, skinny tire type of cars. Plus, any shop can get a replacement wheel, tire, lug nut. It's all available. So, super nice should a road hazard be encountered in the future. The wheels themselves came with a 2.65-inch diameter center bore, but the hubs on the front and rear axles are 2.78 inches. So I had to bore out the wheel centers to fit, which I did by hand. And let me tell you, that is a slow process. But I got them opened up really nice and they bolt on slick like they were made for the car. The factory lug nuts were metric mag style, closed end, big cumbersome things. With a little research, I found small open-ended mag nuts that fit the imperial thread size on the lugs that have the same overall shank diameter as factory, so a win there. The wheels have a little bit of curve to the spokes. Tricky to see with them being black, but that's factory for you. If you look at a really sharp angle, you can see how the curve is pretty shallow. With the body being a little lower and more rounded than an original Type 35, the slight curve of the wheel sort of complements the shape of the body. In person, it's kind of graceful looking. When the car's done, I'm going to finish them in raw aluminum. I think the lighter color will give the car more dimension overall. But on the subject of wheel shape, this was kind of interesting. If you look inside the wheel, you can see how much room there is between the wheel mounting pad and the brake caliper. Back in the day, they started making disc brake compatible wheels, like the Torque Thrust and its disc brake version, the Torque Thrust D. But look at all that room. Let us take a look at the rear wheel. The brake caliper back here actually hangs over the wheel mounting pad, thus the impetus for disc brake wheels. The wheels clear the brakes by a mile, but that's just funny. And least I forget the headlights. I mounted them up because it just looks the part having them on. Like, they make the car look finished. They're 9.5 inches in diameter, which looks huge compared to the car's tiny radiator, but relative to the overall size of the car, they were chosen, just like the wheels and tires, to emphasize just how small the body really is. I mounted them at a few different points along the front frame rail, expecting them to look the best mounted off the front crossmember, but actually, the further back I placed them, the better the car looked, so I mounted them in front of the second crossmember, just far enough forward that they didn't crowd up the nose of the car. I think they came out looking fantastic. There'll eventually be an apron underneath them to cover the crossmember and take up some of the visual space at the nose of the car, but the forward section of the frame that had been looking disproportionately long compared to the size of the grille is now shrinking as space is occupied by other objects. By the time the car's done, it'll have a very Type 37 view from the front. Like I said though, from the right angle, this car looks like you could just hop in and take it for a drive. If it had a steering wheel and a drive shaft, intake manifold, exhaust, floorboards, shifter, gas tank, ignition, any wiring at all, brakes,